Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now. Every time I come on, you know that I'm going to say, I have just the most amazing author with me. And I wish I could sort of like double, triple that for this consultation that we're going to be sharing right now. I met Jo Spain a few years ago in Newcastle at Waterstones bookstore, and just even in that brief chance to engage in conversation made me think this is somebody whose work is just, it's more than amazing. If you really want to lose yourself and wonder how on earth does an author bring together so many different strands to then land you at the end with a, oh, well, this is an author for you if you've not read Jo's work before. I'm sure you've had. Jo, welcome into the consultation room. How is it? How's everything going?
Well, I've got a funny rash. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to take time out from the day job and just, talk about books.
Yeah, and I am so glad that our time together has coincided to be able to celebrate your latest publication, The Perfect Lie. How does it feel? Because if I'm right in thinking, there are 6 novels in the Tom Reynolds series, and I think, is this your 4th standalone now?
Yes, this is my 10th novel, which I think is kind of forbears something. I'm expecting great things. I'm thinking like New York Times bestseller. No, it's not America yet.
I think it should, because I think as well, if we look at when that first novel, like, because the first novel was With Our Blessing, was it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going back 6 years, and in 6 years, you have produced, a series with a protagonist that is just, well, it is glorious. And if we can, I know we're not here to talk about Tom in any great detail, but I just have a few questions. I thought, if you'll allow me, and then the fact that you do this thing of every now and again, you give us this, this complete tale that just, they are tales that spin you around so much. I want to ask a little bit later, how is it that you manage to manipulate, I know that's maybe a negative word, but you manipulate the reader's approach to each character so well? It's like you think you like somebody and then you're not sure, you're rooting for a character and then you think, nah, and then you think, oh, but maybe the roller coaster ride is brilliant. It's brilliant. So welcome and congratulations on A Perfect Lie. And if I might start asking you about why crime fiction? I mean, I've read that you're a journalist and you've worked in the political sphere. When did that moment arrive when you thought, I'm going to get into crime fiction?
I mean, I think I was killing time until I could get into crime fiction, to be honest. I was doing jobs that would pay the wages. I started reading at a very early age, and I mean, I've spoken about it before. It's no secret. I grew up in a very working class estate that was full of very funny, interesting people, but it wasn't an aesthetically pleasing place to live. And my escape from this place was to just lose myself in books. So while I was living on an estate that had like regularly stolen cars and horses in the garden and things like that, at night time I was off in Kieran Island in with the famous five, or with the the five fine outers, and this kind of bucolic English countryside, which also happened to have mysteries. And I was so engaged in the independence of those kids going off to solve those mysteries. So from an early age, I just fell in love with the genre, just the question that's the reader, and then the readers like finding the answers along with the protagonists in the books. And that progressed then to, I mean, every crime fiction author I could lay my hands on. I went from Enid Blyton to Agatha Christie. And the more I speak to people, that seems to be a seamless segue.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to follow the same route. And I mean, I still read everything and every genre, But for me, the go-to is crime fiction. And so if I've got kind of pleasure reading, as I call it, on a weekend or a holiday, I'm looking to find the best latest crime fiction. Or sometimes I'll Google best crime fiction in South Africa, or in
Yeah.
really new South Korea or Japan or whatever, and I'll go to those countries in my mind and learn something while reading a crime book, which I love. So I always enjoyed writing, but I never thought that was a career option for me. Not in an author sense. I mean,
Hmm.
there's writing where you're not, like, I always just thought that was something special people did. Like really successful, talented people had books on shelves, and that's not something that I would be able to do. So I followed a career that let me do writing.
Hmm.
I do writing. I'm good with the words. That let me write. And then I don't know, it is as truthful as this. My husband had lost his job. My job was very demanding. I wanted to try and earn some extra money. And I thought I'll write a book and see if I can sell it. Knowing that was very unlikely. Knowing, well, probably not knowing how badly paid authors are, at least at the start of their career. But just thinking this is something that I enjoy doing, so why not do it anyway? And if it works, it works. And I sent it into the Richard Judy search for a bestseller, and it was shortlisted. And that's when my life
Yes.
changed. No agent, I'd never sent it anywhere. My first novel, literally the first thing I'd ever written,
Wow.
that got shortlisted, and everything just went from there. And I don't know, I suppose I still say to people, take a chance. You know, anybody can, those books you see on the shelves, those actors you see in TV shows, it's all hard work, but
Mhm.
anybody can do it. You need a little bit of luck. Sometimes you need to be spotted. Sometimes you need the world to be in your favor. But if you are doing the hard work and you have a talent and a flair, chances are you'll get there.
Yeah, yeah. I love every time, I meet an author here in the consultation room, and I'm keen to know how people begin. Where does it all start? And everybody's story is different. Yes, there are some maybe elements that are similar, but when you hear from people's heart, what is it that has brought them and the genre together? It's always really exciting. So thank you for sharing those beginnings, and here you are now, 10 books later, and that name, that best-selling author, without a doubt. But again, before we get into the perfect line, you are also a scriptwriter, yeah, for TV dramas. And I wonder, because I was going to ask you which came first. So I presume you started writing your crime fiction before you moved to script writing. Did it happen that way?
Yeah, I had a few books published when the head of RTE Drama Commission at the time read those books and met me and commissioned me to write an original show, which was fantastic. And again, it's kind of through virtue of people liking the books, but also just kind of putting myself out there and talking to people and meeting people and making sure that they knew that I had this body of work there. I've subsequently found out how unusual it is for authors to move into screenwriting. It's more common for screenwriters to move into the book world because they've got the name, and they all want to, because it's much easier to write books than for screen. Much more pleasurable, like once it's pleasurable, it's easier. Writing for screen is very difficult. But the difference between screen and books is that screen pays at such a level that it can sustain me writing full time in the author world. And it's all writing, so it's all enjoyable. It's just screenwriting is, chipping away at my soul. It's not as beautiful as novel writing, it's not only you on the page. It's a collaborative effort with studios and financiers and directors and actors and so on. And it's a very visual style of writing. Like I just recently said in an interview, when I write for screen, I write visually. And when I write novels, I write very much using words. And I think if you love words, write books. If you love storytelling, you can write for screen.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way to put it, Jo. And I also like the notion of, you do the script, the screenwriting, you do that, but it then allows you the pleasure of creating the book.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have a product every year, because we're filming a show at the moment that I've done with my co-writer Dave Logan, and we're working on 5 other projects together. And we know I'm on
Whoa.
multiple projects at any given time. We know that any amount of work we do, if we're doing 10 shows, one of them will probably get filmed in the next year. You know, the other ones might get filmed as years go on, but for a screenwriter, that can be soul destroying. You know, you've worked so hard on something, and sometimes something can go wrong at studio level, or the broadcast just won't, they don't want to show the show, or you just can't get it across the line in any way, shape, or form. At least with a novel, you know, it's very rare that a novel gets completely scrapped. Most of the time, when you've done a novel, it's there. So I get the joy of every single year I've got a product out there of my writing. Whereas my co-writer Dave, like, he's got his screenwriter trunk, we call it, like where dreams go to die, and then you recycle them 4 years later, and you know, so on and so forth. So I'm living the best of both worlds, even though it's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, I do think that the stamina that you have, knowing, you have a family, and all that, and I just think, you are such a role model, Joe. I don't know whether you intend to be, but I really think you are, because of your craft, your graft, and also the way you're so generous with other writers, and with the reading public. Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being that woman. Mm, mm. So now,
Very much. Yeah, that feels very nice.
let's get down to the matter in hand, if we can. I think if there were prizes being awarded for the most gob-smacking opening, I think A Perfect Lie should win it. And I don't want to give it away, because I think people should just read that straight off. Don't read any of the reviews. Don't read. Just read that opening, and then try and come down from that. But let's talk, if we can, about that couple, those protagonists. So Erin and Danny. Can we start with those? Is that okay? And I was keen to know the idea of bringing that fusion together of Ireland and the US. What led you to bring these two people together, and why choose those nationalities to do it?
Mhm. I mean, it's so common. Like, they sometimes, I think, like most countries in the world, but particularly America, it's generally Ireland running through the DNA and the blood. Because so many of us, like, we've always as a country turned on the emigration tap whenever things have been difficult economic wise, and that has just been cycles of that. Like, even in my life, every other decade there's a cycle of the emigration tap, and then my decades before me, so every single Irish person has got somebody in their family living abroad, more often than not England, but outside of that, then before it became so difficult to get a visa, it would typically be America, Canada, and now more because of planes, Australia, New Zealand, so where they speak English essentially. But I think because of that, like, we grew up in Ireland watching so much English TV and American TV. Like, we're very much, we can move between Britain and Ireland with ease. And I really noticed that with my co-writer Dave Logan. Like, I keep telling him what stuff means in Dublin, in Dublinese, whereas I can speak like Cockney and Scottish and Welsh, and I understand all the different dialects in Britain because I grew up with that, like Newcastle, Bikers Grove, like that's stuff that I grew up with, whereas he's never grown up with Dublin language as such. It's the same with America. Then we're very Americanized as a country, and I see it even more so now with my kids and TikTok and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's natural to bring, I wanted to put her outside her comfort zone, outside everything she was familiar with. Like, she had emigrated, as so many Irish people do, and it's fine. Her life is absolutely fine. She's met this lovely man. He's a detective. He makes her feel very safe, because she did suffer a tragedy in her own life years ago in her family, which isn't a huge secret in terms of the book, but it certainly feeds into it. And he's just there, and he's helped her make this life as beautiful as she ever wanted it to be. And then when he dies, she's on her own. She's on her own. Her sister comes over, but she realizes at that point how far she is away from home, and how unfair this jurisdiction actually is to her when something goes wrong. And I mean, I had in my mind the idea of, the notion of the Skype generation, where you move to Australia and you have your first child, you're Skyping granny at home.
Yeah.
It's such a, that's tough enough. You know, you're a new mother, you want your own man there, and of course, Granny wants to see her grandchild. To kind of make that by 100, where actually something awful can happen. Someone you love has died, and your family aren't around you. And next thing, in this novel, she's charged with a crime.
Before we go on and talk about Erin's dealings with the American justice system, and again, because we don't want to reveal too much about, but Danny. So tell us about Danny as his cop. Yeah.
Mhm.
How did they meet?
So they've met. She's over there living that immigrant life where she's got a job in a publishing house, which was very easy for me to write, known so well. And her sister comes over one weekend, and her sister, she's in New York at this point. She hasn't moved to Long Island. And her sister basically wants to just go out on the lash for the weekend, you know, do shots.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
As you do in New York, you know,
Uh-huh.
their weekend. And she says, I want you to find me a guy in uniform, you know. She's looking for, you know, we all know the FDNY, things like that, NYPD. And her sister ends up copping off with basically kind of this is a bar where the uniform guys tend to go, but her sister ends up copping off with a civil servant. And Erin is laughing because only her sister could find the only non-uniform guy in the entire place, you know. But this guy's chatting her up, and she figures out he's actually in uniform, and she's, are you NYPD? And he tells her he's actually out in Suffolk County, he's out in Long Island, which to her is the sticks.
Yeah.
You know, you're on New York, Long Island's like the countryside. But they click straight away. They click straight away over their love of movies, and she's a big Ennio Morricone fan. And Fistful of Dynamite, you know, and they always say you put things of yourself into books, and I'm a big Ennio Morricone fan, like, and a big Fistful of Dynamite fan, you know. So in every single one of my books there'll be a little thing that's something that I love.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what brings this couple together, and he's the perfect man, which is a great way to start a novel where you're going to make somebody not perfect. So start with them appearing perfect, and then work on the arc, you know. What he really is human. And
Yeah.
she's able to find that out, you know. It's not, I never like to write characters that are bad or good. I like to write, you know, humanity. And I think with humanity, we're all so flawed, and we all have so many secrets in our lives, and you don't want everybody to know every single thing about you.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah.
the people who seem to be honest with Tourette's almost, are keeping things back. And that's protagonists.
Yeah, and I think the skill, Joe, that you have though is that idea of what you reveal and when you reveal it. You know, I think I mean, I'm not saying that your novels are not funny, not at all, but it reminds me of that thing about, you know, with comedy, timing is everything. And I think the stories that you tell, it's the knowing, you know, knowing when to reveal, knowing when to bring to the reader just those little bits of knowledge that actually then say, oh, wait a minute, really? Um, yeah, it's beautiful skill, like I say. So we have this couple, something untoward happens. Erin is left there to deal with this. And I just wondered though, I mean, New York, you know, New York seems to be, yeah, that seems to be a very, you know, choice to make for a location. But you take us to Long Island, and you also give us a, you know, that there's another strand running through here that's in Harvard. And again, I just wondered, you know, you're making those choices because, you know, the United States is full of just the most amazing places. Why these, you know, this sort of like this patchwork of places that make up the backdrop to this story?
I mean, I suppose it's where I know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've yet to write a book somewhere where I've never entirely been. So I've been to New York a good few times. So I hadn't been in Long Island as much as features in this book. So what I did was I created a fictional town on Long Island that I knew kind of reflected a lot of Long Island. But I was obsessed with writing somewhere in this place because years ago, it was both through TV and books. At first I'd watched that series, The Affair,
Mm.
set in Ireland, and over the years I've seen plenty of things set there, and it just seems like paradise, just paradise. I mean, it's on the doorstep of New York, so you have that kind of city life and everything that comes with that vibrancy.
Mm.
But you've got these kind of long stretches of coast and these kind of like seaside picturesque towns just beside that, and a lot of people commute between the two. But I became a big fan of Nelson DeMille. So he sets a lot of his books on Long Island, and when I used to read his books, I wanted to move there. You know, when you read somewhere, no matter if he's dead in the book, you're thinking, "Oh, seems like a lovely place to live."
The place looks great, yeah.
So that was, I mean, because I could have just left it in New York, but it wouldn't have had the same sleepiness, you know, the same. I mean, her life should be as perfect as you think it's going to be, because she lives in this beautiful place. It's an apartment, and the French door windows open out to, you know, the sea view, the same windows that her walks to in the first chapter, you know, and it's, everything is just destroyed. And I think in all my books, I like to take places, well, in most of them anyway, that look very nice, at least on the surface. And then when you scratch a little bit, there's something else going on. So Long Island was perfect for that.
Perfect, right? Perfect, yeah. And I also think as well that there's an aspect to this novel that I think is, I find it extremely interesting. That idea of exploring, you know, the notion of class and privilege. You know, who gets to inhabit these spaces and why, and what does that mean? You know, that if you are in a certain place and if you have those certain connections, then life is very different.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things as well. I think during COVID, this became very apparent to us that if you had money, your world could be a different place. I'm thinking of when the Kardashians were doing that video of the short breaks that they were taking to exotic islands, just because the world was stressful right now.
Yeah.
And everybody's at home thinking, I'm not allowed to leave my 2 kilometer zone. How are you on a plane?
How can you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and then I was reading articles about Parisian restaurants, that there was a rumor about restaurants that were open for the kind of high polloi in Paris. So if you had the money and the contacts, you were able to dine. Like the rest of us are just waiting for McDonald's to open, you know, so we can get takeaway Big Macs, and they're still dining in 5-star Michelin restaurants, you know. So that has always been in my mind, that there's people who just live in a different sphere, mentally and physically, but they're still people, you know. They can do bad things, they can do good things. And on Long Island, there's a particular, I bring her off at one point in the book, she goes up to what they call the Gold Coast. Somebody's saying in the book that only people who have never been to the Gold Coast think that there's no such thing as a class system in America, because actually money buys you into that class system. It's just not as visible perhaps as older class systems like in England or France or places like that, you know. So yeah, when I started off on this, I'm now in Long Island in my head. I can't even remember what you asked. I'm just thinking, loads of money in Long Island.
That is just right, because we were talking about exploring the aspects of class and privilege, you know, and Long Island is, you know, that setting that allows that to happen. So through, you know, through Marriage to Danny, she's already had presumably some exposure, as it were, to, you know, the US police system and the police force. But when it comes to that thing of being, you know, being brought into that, maybe in a negative way, I wondered about you exploring the US police force. And was it easy for you to construct, or the judicial system, was it easy for you to construct that aspect of the novel?
Yeah, well, I mean, like she's not a complete novice when it comes to, let's say, police forces not being absolutely perfect. Because she does say she comes from Ireland, and the Irish police force has had its fair share of corruption and tribunals, you know, much as in Britain. I don't know if there's a police service in the world that's completely good, and she's aware of this, but that doesn't mean that every serving police officer is bad. And I mean, in my Tom Reynolds series, Tom is just, you know, the policeman we all want. Like, you know, he's the cut out of a detective.
Please, yes.
Loyal, intelligent, always the good guy. He's, you know, like pretty much as we elevate all detectives in crime fiction, you know. I know sometimes we do write dodgy cops and line of duties, case in point, you know. But for the most part, we are hoping that these kind of bastions of all that is good are out there to protect us.
Yes, yeah.
There are different approaches in police throughout the world, and some police forces are better than others. And I have a detective friend who kind of summed up the difference between the Irish and a little bit English police system versus the US police system. He was saying that in in an Irish interrogation in an interview cell, when they bring the suspect in, it will be a very collegiate affair. You know, they will try to connect with the suspect in some levels. So in the US system, it's a far more confrontational system. And they will literally bring you in and they will say, we know you committed this crime. We have you on camera committing this crime. Your mother is about to testify against you. Do you want to confess now so you can avoid the chair? So it's intimidating for, there have been a lot of false confessions in America because of this. And I mean, it does differ from state to state, but as a whole, the American police force is quite tough compared to other police forces around the world, you know. And I think Erin meets Danny, and he's a good detective. You know, he's one of these good guys. She likes how he does his job. She likes the work ethic he has, and she likes how she feels around him, because the family tragedy that happened to her back in Ireland brought her into interaction with the law it came about because of bad, but she experienced good with the law. You know, they were there to help her, and she feels that about Danny. So it is a shock for her to realize as the book goes on that the American police system, and her husband included, are not everything she thought it was. And I think what comes home to her, something we're all familiar with, is that, you know, through film and that, when an American cop dies, generally there's a really good send off.
Oh yeah.
Coffin, they're all there. They're all pals with each other, you know. She loses somebody in this book, and I mean, we're not giving anything away. It's on the cover of the book.
It's on the covers, yeah.
Danny's gone early on, and his funeral doesn't have that, and that really shocks her. It's when she feels absolutely, completely alone, is when that happens, because she assumes that the boys in blue, you know, they'll be the family that wrap themselves around her, and she has no physical family bar her sister, and she's on her own.
Yeah, and it's not what she expected, as you say. It's not that experience that we have, albeit secondhand from the screens or what we see. I did want to ask you, because I felt that it was a very cautionary tale as well with the book, about, you know, a warning note of how well can you ever know somebody that you fall for? It's a bit like, you know, be careful, you know. And I'm thinking now how much of what people are doing has to be on dating apps, because we can't, you know, and so even more so, when is the moment where we can actually say, I think I know the person that I'm with?
I don't know if you can. So I feel so sorry for people these days with social media, because everything on social media is a lie. You know, like you take 15 photographs of yourself and you pick the best photograph of you, and then obviously you're going to say nice things about yourself as well to lure people into your dating trap, you know. But I mean, in real life as well, do we ever? I mean, you can be married to somebody for 50 years, and we've seen it. Like sometimes it's a huge secret, like somebody dies and you find that there's a second family somewhere, you know. But more often than not, I think it's just, there is always going to be things that you keep inside yourself that you don't share with everybody, you know, and whether that's maybe you're sneakily judgmental about something that your partner likes, or, you know, unless you live in a relationship where it's just utter contempt and you tell them what you think all the time, you know, a lot of the time you're filtering anyway. You know, in tiny little white lies, you're filtering stuff. I mean, my husband's going to be watching this now going, what? but, but I mean, I think it's just humanity, you know. But then sometimes there's a big lie, you know, and that's what's at the heart of this book, that her, with the best will in the world, when she loses Danny in that opening chapter, he has been keeping something massive back from her, you know, that she's left on her own to find out about, which is worse again, because he's her best friend, and he's the person that she'd say, God, you never guess what happened, and what do you think's going on here? And not only is he not there, but he's the one who's left her with all those questions as well. Yeah.
A deliciously disturbing read. It really is. You know, I really wish you all the best with this book, because it's interesting. My mum said to say, when you talk to Joe, just tell Joe, thank you for, you know, for books that are just really take you away and really leave you with so many questions, and then it comes back at the end and it's like, like that. So, you know, I want to thank you. I've had a tremendous read, and I want to thank you that my mum's had a tremendous read as well. I wonder if you'll allow me, though, because I know, you know, I know this isn't part of your series, but that development of a character, and the promotion of a character as well, like setting off, and we've seen Tom, he's grown and grown and grown. Where are you with him now? What do you feel about him?
I mean, I love Tom, and the only reason there isn't another book on Tom now is that I have gone down to one book a year, because I used to write two a year, one
Yeah.
in series, one in the standalones. I'm doing so much TV now that it has to be one a year, which I know even for some authors is still fine, but it means something has to be sacrificed. And the standalones are the ones that do very well internationally, because very few people come in and buy book 7 in a series. All the other ones, I mean, he'll come back again. I think I did promote Tom quite quickly. Had I thought this out at the start, and that will tell you how little I actually do plan, I wouldn't have had him put up to the rank he was put up to as quick as I did.
So,
Because
yeah.
the last guy, to kind of like make sure he wasn't doing paperwork, which in real life would be what his rank is doing.
So you wish you hadn't maybe promoted Tom as quickly as you did, yeah?
Yeah, I think if I'd gone back and thought about it all at the start, I wouldn't have promoted him so quickly, because I mean, that says how little I do think about those kind of arcs long term. But I didn't know I'd be writing a series.
Yeah.
I didn't know it'd be
Yeah.
successful. And I just kept moving him up the ranks, because he's great. He deserves the promotions. But I got to the point where in the last book, essentially, he could have just been doing paperwork for the whole book,
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I bring him back, I'll get around it creatively, like I did with the last book. He will be involved in cases, but he's fostered a good team around him. And I think that's as useful a thing in a crime series to do as to just keep your main protagonist there all the time, that they've other team members you're invested in. So Laura has taken over from him. So, never say never. He'll come back at some time when I've time to write him.
Yeah.
I feel ransom in my head at the moment for his fans, but there's plenty of plots for him, and there's plenty of ways he can go. So please God, I get time to do more Toms.
Totally. Well, I mean, I know we all hope for that, but I think at this moment in time, it just remains for me to say, may that perfect lie, may it just fly. I mean, I know it will. Thank you once again for creating criminal wonderment. And when we can, Joe, I really hope we can welcome you to Newcastle in the flesh, to the festival, to be part of that. I think the time is coming soon, but I know we need to stay safe and sensible until then. And I just want to thank you for your time. I know you're extremely busy, as we've said, so I just thank you for taking time out, for coming into the consultation room, and for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel completely cured. Thank you.
You are totally sorted. Joe, until the next time.
Yes.
All
We
the
can
very best.
only do meetings in person from now on. Like, technology is not our friend.
No, but we've conquered it. Yes.
We have. I still feel like carrier pigeons would have been quicker.
They would, but we've made it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.